I'd like to introduce Sarah Louise Nelson and Rachel Phillips from Melbourne Polytechnic. Rachel's a Gomeroi woman born in Moree and raised in Tamworth in New South Wales. Since 2015, Rachel's been excelling in the role of director at Birrelly Multifunctional Aboriginal Children's Service in Tamworth. Sarah Louise is a Melbourne-based early childhood teacher, an early career academic, mum of two, and the founder of Sarah Louise Consultancy. Her 20-year career spans a variety of roles and settings, and she's complemented her work with formal studies in the areas of early childhood education, leadership, and research. Sarah Louise is a forever learner, I love that, who is committed to making the world a better place for children by tapping into love and kindness. So I welcome them to speak on reimagining professional love in early childhood education and care through reading.
Thank you so much, Karen, for that beautiful introduction. We are Sarah Louise and Rachel, and we have been presenting this work and some iteration of this work for a couple of years now. And we're exceptionally passionate about the professional love space and what this means in different communities. And so I'm so pleased to be working with Rachel to present this today, thinking about what professional love looks like, particularly at the Birrelly Max site. Before we go any further, I'd like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the lands on which I live, work and learn. That is the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, though I am today visiting the Gunai country out in East Gippsland. I'd like to acknowledge traditional custodians, past and present, and acknowledge the deep cultural knowledge that we are all that's being shared with us today, beautiful expressions of language, of culture and of love. I'd also like to acknowledge briefly that Rachel is an exceptional gift to me as a non-Indigenous first-generation Australian. The things that she has shared with me in terms of her language, her culture, music, knowledge is never taken for granted. And I am so exceptionally proud to sit in this space with Rachel and to share in that. But Rachel, would you also like to do an acknowledgement?
Yeah, Maraba, thank you. Yama, my name is Rachel Phillips. I'm a Gomeroi woman born in Moree, raised in Tamworth, as we said, which is all on Gomeroi country. I'm here on Gomeroi country today. Actually just got back from New Zealand last week at the WIPSI conference. So, again, building that knowledge and sharing our culture. And I would really like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the legacy that I am a part of here. Birrelly started in the 1970s and is a generational service. So, but yeah, so I am pretty exhausted today. I'm a little bit sick, and Sarah will take the lead on this. So thank you for covering for me today.
You are so welcome. Although I will now throw to you just to give a little bit of context about Birrelly Max for those that are maybe not as familiar with the early childhood sector. It is a broad and very interesting sector, and we're going through some very challenging political times, I think, in early years across Australia, though particularly in New South Wales and Victoria, where we're seeing new reforms and impacts on children and families, which unfortunately are significantly impacting Aboriginal children and families in particular, in terms of funding arrangements and access. Not necessarily always positive, so there are some challenges, but just so we have a little bit of context, Rachel, about the magic that is Birrelly Max, would you like to share a little bit about the service and the history?
Yeah, so Birrelly was started in the early 1970s when our Aboriginal children weren't allowed to go to mainstream services. We were segregated during that time. And people kind of get a little bit shocked with that because segregation wasn't years and years ago. Like my parents are still alive who experienced this. So, and that's why I talk about the legacy here and why we exist. So we've been operating close to 50 years. And one of 4 exceeding services in around Tamworth, and that is out of about 16. So there's 70,000 people here in Tamworth. That's a regional part of New South Wales. And we have around about 50 to 60 Aboriginal children attend our service over the week. 15 staff who are the majority of Aboriginal staffing. And I think it's around about 11 out of the 15 at the moment. We're just hiring. And 6 of those 11 used to attend Birrelea as children. So when we say we're a generational service and a community service, that's reinvestment into our community. We do just finished our audit, and I can confirm we have 11 different funding streams to survive. And some recent data that I've had access to actually shows that ACOs, our Aboriginal Community Controlled Organisations, spend 60% of our time focused on survival, focused on keeping the doors open for our community. So, but really, like I was at the at the conference last week, and something hit really hard about how powerful it is to have our children. It is their birthright to access our culture. It is our responsibility to provide them with cultural safety. And the models that we talk about, I was really, really proud because our early childhood ACOs actually deliver that. So it was a good reflection and brings us straight into what's happening here today about what we can do to change the thought process around culture and connecting with our Aboriginal children.
Thanks, Rachel. It will become more apparent as we go on about why Birrelea was such an important part of what we're loosely calling our research, because really, when we got down to it, we started with a research question, but it very much ended up as a relationship rather than a piece of formal research. So it's also important to acknowledge the relationship that Rachel and I have built over the last few years. And this hasn't been something that's been going on for a long time. We met kind of by chance. We crossed paths at an Early Childhood Australia National Conference in 2023 after a keynote by Dr. Jules Page from the UK. And Jules Page had presented on her work, her seminal work on professional love, which I absolutely found riveting. I was all for it. I was all in. Tell me more, tell me more. And Rachel was very challenged by it and didn't necessarily agree. When we had this chance encounter, we debated a little bit. I told Rachel about my perspective, and Rachel just kept coming back to, yeah, but that doesn't work in community. This doesn't fit with our culture. And it was something that kind of sat with me for a little while, and we continued that dialogue, texting and jumping onto Zoom, and continued to talk about love, leadership, and all the different ideas that professional love presents to us. And we've continued to do that over 5 national conferences now, which has been pretty cool to develop that. But we're now at a point where, like Rachel said, she's not feeling 100% today and, has that trust in me that I can hold space for her, but also the knowledge that she'll be sharing today in a really respectful and valuable way. So this hasn't been very long, this relationship, but it has become extremely significant. And when we think about this idea of professional love that I'll introduce in a moment, that needs to be part of it. The relationship plays a really big role in how we reimagine, how we enact professional love in our spaces. One of the things that Rachel and I got talking about when we did start to kind of dive into the research part of this project, when I was invited to come up to Tamworth and spend a few days being immersed in the community, spending time with the educators, listening to the children sing in language, and just all the beautiful experiences that came with that. This idea of the ecological model came up, and it is something that theoretically sits alongside professional love. But again, it was something that was challenging Rachel in particular, that there wasn't this necessarily cohesion with what was actually happening within the service. And Rachel, I don't want to put words into your mouth. So do you want to just give us a little synopsis of what was sitting uncomfortably for you with the ecological model?
It was more about that it was this view that only immediate family and only certain things impacted on a child so much. Whereas within our culture, when we say family, there's no difference between extended family and immediate family. It's just family. Like I have grown up not knowing the difference between a first, second, or third cousin. Like they is just, and majority of the time, they're probably not even related that I'm calling cousin. So, just that idea around, eh, you know, culture and family and the impacts that we can have on children. And when looking at this model, I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, so where does culture fit in? Where is culture here? Because culture for me isn't something that I learn. Yes, we do learn, but it's actually a part of me. And it was really hard to articulate then what that would look like in practice. And it took us a while to kind of make it land because I'm like, well, is culture part of church and religion, or is culture a part of um, you know, uh the neighbors or the ideologies of culture at that macro system. Like it's definitely not that far. So, and then with the professional love side of things, I was like, what's this professional love language? Like it's a language that we use, and it's probably a little bit similar to how we use the word culture, a country, I mean. So country to some people would be an asset, to something to own, to occupy. Whereas country to me is country owns us. Country is a part of us. We come from country. So it's about that understanding that the one word could mean very two different things. So when we look at professional love, I'm like, what's this professional love? Like love is love. And we just wanted to challenge it and land somewhere.
And it was around this time that we were having this conversation too, Rachel, that you walked down the hallway and grabbed a piece of weaving that you had done and shared that with me to say, this is how you were imagining it, that it wasn't these perfect concentric circles that just fit around each other. Every single part of that ecological model is essentially a strand that you're grabbing and pulling together, weaving together. And I remember you telling me, there were all the different colors, that green was about country, and then, there was a family relationship that was red. And then you talked about this black line as well of the intergenerational trauma that sits within there and that true history that is always going to be part of that child's individual weaving. And so that's where we started to think that maybe there was something to this idea of professional love that we could bring into the weaving space, or that we could reimagine somehow. So for those that aren't familiar with Dr. Jules Page's work, professional love is a pedagogical concept that really talks about and theorizes this relationship, this reciprocal, deep, trusting relationship between a parent, a caregiver, who in this case is an early childhood educator, and the child. And the idea here is that no aspect of those relationships within the context of an early childhood space is seen as more valuable or more important than the other, that each part plays a very equal, each piece plays a very equal part in that relationship. And so when Rachel introduced this idea of weaving, it got us thinking about how we could start to imagine this idea of professional love being beyond what Jules talks about as a triangular relationship between the three parties, to being something that was more organic, woven, connected to country, and really steeped in culture. And so this, Rachel, if you wanted to just quickly talk about this image here, because it is so beautiful.
Yeah, so these the woven animals that we see here are animals that I had woven. It was the first time I attempted to weave small animals, and that was the result. And they ended up in the local art gallery here. But it was a chance for children to come and touch and play with and look at, and the Weaving Warraba by Yinama Lee was Amy Hemon who taught me how to weave. It was about community coming together and weaving together. And I'm very much a visual person. So when we're looking at things and trying to explain what is in my head, I like to have that vision. So when we picked up that weaving and I went and used the different colors and what that meant, that felt natural to me because it's a practice that has been a part of my culture for over 60,000 years. So Yeah.
Thanks, Rachel. So we were wondering about what these Western perspectives of family and kinship actually meant when when reimagined in a place as culturally steeped as Birrelly Max. And so we were really questioning this role of kinship and how it either connected or was really disconnected from that professional love triangle. And like I said before, we started with a bit of a research question about what does love look like in a culturally saturated place like Birrelly Max, when we know that that triangle simply does not encapsulate the depth and the beauty of the kinship relationships that we were seeing. I was really fortunate when I was there at Birrelly Max, that a chance encounter, again, it's all about chance, with Auntie Teresa Roberts. Auntie Teresa was visiting the service, working with some of the team. Was it on dance, Rachel? She
Yeah,
was helping
dance
with
and
some dancing.
language.
And she was sitting in the staff room, which is connected to Rachel's office. And Rachel and I were kind of going back and forth about, well, what does love mean? And in this context, it means this. And in this context, it means that. And Auntie Teresa came out with some absolutely gorgeous quotes. So they're there on your screen. We won't read them all out. But one of the big things that Auntie Teresa really highlighted for us was that love can't just be this three-way thing, that it's so much more than that. When we do make it a three-way relationship, a triangular relationship, we were really just putting it in a box on a shelf. That was something else to do. But Auntie Teresa talked about how love is actually a part of us, and she gifted us the word Winanale to talk about the different ways that love actually plays a part in the relationships that people have, in the learning of children, and this deep connection between Father Sky and Mother Earth. So she very much talked about how love isn't just a thing that we have that we can talk about, how we are love and we come from love, and that we will continue to give love until we are back in country, sharing our love back to country. Rachel, did you want to comment any further on Auntie Teresa's? We're running out of time, but was there anything you wanted
I
to add?
know, and it's and again, I always add in extra stuff. Every time we do this, I like to surprise Sarah with where my brain's at today. But again, like we know that when we're educating children and that things don't just come in a box. So when this idea of a triangle, that's still restrictive for me. So and it was just perfect timing that she talked about that. And like here, our culture doesn't change, our laws don't change. And we aren't just living in one culture. Our culture has been here for over 60,000 years. And I heard it at the latest Snake conference was a different way, and it was over 2,000 generations. So just being able to then hear a wording around that again. And and last week I heard it over and over again. It is our birthright to have access to our culture. So
Yeah.
pretty
Thank you. So where did we land after we had all these conversations and I observed practice and we went back and forth, yarning and dialoguing? We ended on this space of weaving, that we actually couldn't extrapolate professional love from this concept that we kind of landed on, that we started with. And in Rachel's words, if you don't mind, Rachel, I'll read them. The weaving tells this story. When we weave, we have all these strands of all the connections to the child, of the child, and it wraps around and entwines them and makes them who they are, because culture is who you are. So for us, this reimagining of professional love really landed in this space of saying we can't have a box, we can't have a triangle. It needed to be something much more organic and real, where it effectively showed that demonstration of how that child is woven together through community, through country, through kinship, and through professional love. So thank you so much.